just a handful of you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and the kind of writing I do so you can actually hear what the words sound like coming from me. And then we're just going to open up for a conversation, okay? My goal here this morning is not to bore you. I have better things to do with my time, and you have better things to do with your time than to be bored by me. So if I get boring, you raise your hand and you stand up and you say you're boring, and I promise you I would change the course of the conversation. Does that seem fair? Yes. All right, well, we're going to be very brave with each other. So my name is Kao Kalia Yang, and I'm Hmong. I speak to all of you in English today. Not because I speak in English, not because I think I sound good in English, because to my ears, and I'm just talking my ears, I'll never sound as good as I do in Hmong. But I speak today because I believe it is important for us to understand each other. I'm here to build a bridge of understanding. I don't care if you agree or disagree with my talk. The truth is that if I'm any good at all, when you walk out those exit doors, you will walk out with a little bit more understanding inside, and I will have succeeded. That's the standard that we're playing by. But my name is Kao Kalia Yang, and I say I'm from the Hmong community. My mom and dad came from Thailand, the refugee camps of Thailand. I came when I was just 6 years old. When we came to America, I knew three American things. The teacher at Battle Creek Elementary School said, say your ABCs. I said A, B, and C. And she said, say your ABCs. And I said A, B, and C. So I failed the test. My older sister, who's a year and 9 months older than I, she said that every color was yellow, and that every English word ended with an S. I thought she was the smartest person in the world. But we came when I was 6. By the time I was 7, I was already learning quite a bit of English. One day, the light bulbs in our house began flickering, and they went out. So my mom took me to Kmart to buy light bulbs. My mom was younger than I am now, and I thought she was an incredibly beautiful woman. After me, she had 6 miscarriages, because in Bambinai refugee camp where I was born, Hmong people only got food 3 days out of the week, because by the time I came along, Thailand was practicing a deterrence policy. Every time I looked at my mom, she would give me the food in her hands. So she did not have enough food for her body. She didn't have enough food to carry life. So 6 miscarriages after me, and I was her baby. Every time she had a miscarriage, I would hear the voices of my aunts and my uncles say, she's dying, she's dying. But in the morning, my mother would get up with me. And so I grew to believe that my mother was the most powerful woman I knew, although she's not much taller than I am. And I think I kind of actually look very much like her. Anyway, I'm 7 years old, and we're at Kmart, and my mom walks up to the clerk because she's so brave, and she points to the ceiling because she doesn't have the one word for light bulb. She says, I'm looking for the thing that makes the world shiny. My mother has an accent. The clerk listened for a little bit, and then she got impatient and she walked away. My mother stood there waiting for her in the fluorescent light. And then at some point she started looking at her feet, and I realized she was ashamed to be in front of me. I decided in that moment that if the world did not need to hear my mother and my father, then surely they didn't need to hear me. So the next day I stopped talking in school. At first, I felt like a rebellion. At first, I felt like I was putting my foot down. But slowly, my voice died in front of me. Because when the teacher said, Kao Kalia Yang, I couldn't say here. My voice sounded so rusty to my ears. It creaked. And other kids laughed and they looked. I began speaking 3 years ago with the publication of my book, The Latehomecomer. So you're meeting a new voice in the world, right? 3 years ago, this book comes out, and it is the first full-length literary work to be published by a Hmong writer in America with national distribution. And I'm saying in this book that Laos is the most heavily bombed nation in the world, only the world didn't know it. I'm saying that 2/3 of the Hmong died so I could be here, 1/3 with the Americans in the war, and another 1/3 in the genocide of its aftermath. And so many intelligent people were saying, if this was going on, then how come we didn't know about it? Because it was America's secret war in Laos. The CIA had commissioned 35,000 Hmong men and boys to fight and to die. And a lot of the fighters were 10, 11, and 12 by the end of the war. Little boys fighting for candy, pockets full of candy. I travel all over the US, and every place I go, there's someone who comes up. And they say, I knew, but I didn't do anything. In Florida, a man came up and he said to me, you know, I was fighting with these boys and they were 11 and they were 12. And I didn't know they were boys until the bombs started falling. And then they started crying for their mothers, putting hands over faces, crying. And I realized they were children. He said, when we left, I don't know what happened to them, but one of them saved my life. And I hope he doesn't hate me wherever he is. But your coming here gives me hope, because it means in so many ways that he has a daughter who remembers his story. That is the kind of story I come from, and that is the voice that I give to English. When my book first came out, people said, who's going to read it? The Vietnam War was so unpopular. Outside of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and California, nobody knows who the Hmong are. Barnes and Noble and Borders didn't want to carry it in store because they said it wasn't commercial. But mostly women, men and women, but mostly women, book lovers, went into the bookstores and they said, we're looking for this book, The Latehomecomer by Kao Kalia Yang. That's how my book made it to the shelves of Barnes and Nobles and Borders. In 2009, my book becomes the first book in Minnesota to have ever won 2 Minnesota Book Awards. Not only am I the first Hmong person or the youngest person to have ever won 2 Minnesota Book Awards, I'm the only one. And so we made history. And I go all over the country speaking to young people because I want you to understand that history is not the thing that makes us. We are the products of history. We create the history that we belong to. Growing up, my mom and my dad taught me. They said to me that they're uneducated people, that they have nothing to give to me in terms of knowledge. They said that it would be the men and the women of the classroom who would teach me where I belong in terms of a bigger history. They sent me to school. My book begins with an epigraph, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I'll tell you why. So the book is written for Zhuo Li, my grandma, who never learned how to write. And then it's also for Maxwell Hu Ya, my little brother, who will read the stories that my grandma has never written. And it begins with an epigraph, and the epigraph says, before babies are born, they live in the sky where they fly among the clouds. The sky is a happy place, and calling babies down to earth is not an easy thing to do. From the sky, babies can see the course of human lives. This is what the Hmong children of my generation are told by our mothers and fathers, by our grandmothers and grandfathers. They teach us that we have chosen our lives, that the people who we will become, we had inside of us from the beginning, and the people whose worlds we share, whose memories we hold strong inside of us, we have always known. From the sky, I would come again. It begins this way because I grew up poor in America. We grew up, I'm a kid from the projects of St. Paul. My mom and dad were able to buy a $35,000 house in 1996 that was 900 square feet in the east side of St. Paul, which is one of the most impoverished neighborhoods. And in this house, the 900 square feet, there was 6 kids and mom and dad, and we shared one bathroom. And the walls were all rotted with mold, and I was always sick because no matter how much we wiped, no matter how many layers of paint, the mold never stopped. It grew wild. I say like the dripping of tears. In this place where I was born, I'd never been to a movie theater. I was in high school and I'd never been to a movie theater, and Leonardo DiCaprio's Titanic came out. So in a house without cable, we watch a lot of Entertainment Tonight, every night at 6:30, and there was a special on Leo. And like a lot of the young women in the nation, I was in love. I knew that Leo was going to be my future husband. And that day, all of my peers, all of my friends said that they were going to go see Titanic in the theaters, and I wanted to go. But I couldn't go because I had to come home to take care of the younger kids so my mom and dad could go to work. They're factory workers, they're assemblers, so they could go to work on the night shift. And I walked home and my book bag felt so heavy in my hand. So I walked right in front of my father. He was sitting on the sofa, tying his safety toe boots, getting ready to go to work. And I walked right in front of him and I dropped my book bag to the ground. And my father looked up. And I looked him in the eye and I said, this is not the life that I wanted. This is not the life that I chosen for me. And the house got really quiet. I noticed because all the kids were looking at me and they couldn't believe the words that had come out of my mouth. And my father looked at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to cry. And then he said words I'll never forget. My father said, if I could choose, I would choose you all over again. And a long time ago, when you were up high in the clouds, when you were flying, when you could see the course of rivers and the trajectory of mountains. You saw a man and a woman walking without shoes in the jungle of Laos, and you chose to come down to them. My father said life is not going to teach you the weakness of the human heart. It is going to teach you how strong that human heart can be. And I had no words. I watched my father got up and limped to the door to stand by a machine one more day, so his supervisor can tell him, B, you're here to talk to machines, you're not here to talk to me. The greatest song poet I know. Many, many years later, I'm writing this book. I'm at Columbia University, one of the finest institutions in this country. Kids from the project do not dream of the Ivy Leagues of the bigger world. But there I was, and I said that I was going to become a writer. I belong to a community that believes we need doctors and lawyers. Doctors to heal what is broken in the human body, lawyers to protect the rights that we've never had enough of. I grew up believing that if you point to the moon is going to come and slice your ears. In the morning I get up and there is blood on my ears. The moon really slices my ear. It really does in the night. Like, how many of you in this room have ever been sliced by the moon? Because you're pointing. Look around you. It happens. A lot of us believe in the power of the moon, and so when we point, the moon comes and slices our ears. That is the reality that we belong to. There is blood on my hands, and everybody can see, but nobody quite believes that the moon would do this to one little Asian girl, one little Hmong girl, living in grave poverty. But there I was at Columbia, and I was writing this book, and I say that I'm going to become a writer for a people that needs one. Three years ago, I began speaking. I don't write a speech because I'm not interested in giving you some digested, some perfected version of myself. I want you to see the transparency of the human heart when it fights for what it believes in. When it fights to build a more understanding world, because I come from a mother and a father, aunts and uncles, grandparents, who cannot tell their stories in English. So they live hidden in misunderstanding. My father says to me, look up at the cloud sky today, the cloud flowers are blossoming. He doesn't just say it's a cloudy day. He says, look out at the garden of winter, the snow flowers are melting. My father says, the sky that I lived on fell on me, and the earth that I walked on threw me off. Who would I be to stand in your way? A long time ago, he carried me and my sisters in his arms. He climbed a tall tree because we couldn't leave the 400 acres that I was born on. 40 to 50,000 Hmong people on 400 acres. If you can imagine, that's less than a square mile in radius. Because he couldn't leave that, my father carried me to the tops of the trees. And he says, look out, look at the horizon. One day you will walk on the horizons your father has never seen. He held up my hand and he says, the size of your hand and your feet will not dictate your life journey. It is for that man that I spoke 3 years ago, and it is for him still that I speak. My father says that if Hmong tears can reincarnate, then the world will reign in our sorrow. But because they cannot, they can only green the mountains of Pumbia. But my words, if I speak, if the winds of humanity blow, then our lives are not lost. That is why I speak. And I am coming from the Hmong story, but I'm here to remind all of you that it wasn't so many generations ago that your parents, your grandparents came from somewhere so you could call this place home. That the English we all speak were built on accents not so differently than my own. And that is why I believe, because we are the happy endings that they've been waiting for. Somewhere in time, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, there's a man and a woman, and we were as far as they were ever going to get into the future. We were the happy endings that they've been waiting for. And that is the ending that I'm out to live. There is no reason why I shouldn't live my life as if it's my dream. The average human being only gets about 25,000 days. That is not so much. I'm not about going and passing by. I'm not here so you can see me for a little bit, sit patiently, and go and let the day continue as it has. I want to change the way you see the world. Whenever you hear Kao Kalia Yang, whenever you think about the day, I want you to remember a little bit that that day is for creating memories. Because one day you'll become old, like my grandma was, the person who I wrote the book for. When your favorite foods and the people who loved you, they will become memories. When you're sitting by that window somewhere in time, it will be your memories that you speak to. And I want all of you to be so clear that you have to create the memories that you want to speak to. 25,000 days is not so much. It's not enough time to do good work. So that's what I do. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm here for all of you. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk to me, not because I have answers. I ask for questions only because I want to think out loud about what matters to you. That remains the only gift that human beings can give to each other. My daddy says that at the end of the road, all we have to give are our tears and our words. And I'm not here because I want to hold those back. So please talk to me. Okay? I'm here for you. I don't want this to be boring. If it is, then you Facebook me and you tell me. Okay? Because I'm out to grow. I want to become a better speaker. I want to become a better writer. I want to become a better human being. I don't even have 25,000 days left, maybe 19,000. And I want to make them count. I'm out to create a memory with you. So talk to me. Okay? Talk. Raise your hand and talk to me. What do you want to know? What can I say that would be useful for the life you live and the work you're out to do? Because it's not about a job, right? Jobs, we get them, we retire from them. The life work that we do there's no point of beginning and no point of ending. Yes? Thank you for being the brave first. How did I get my inspiration to write my book? The truth is that most human beings do what they do because of love. They end up where they do because of love. I grew up thinking that I was going to become a doctor. At Carleton College, I was studying American Studies, Cross-Cultural Studies, Women's and Gender Studies, and I was on the pre-med track. But my grandma told me that education was the garden that I cultivated in America, and that one day we would go and reap the harvest together. My grandma told me that she promised me that she would never die. All of my life, I've always only known this old woman with a single tooth. When we couldn't afford ice cream in the heat of summer, my grandma used to put sugar on my tongue and an ice cube and tell me that that was sweet and cold coming together in the mouth of a child. My grandma told me when I felt despondent because I dreamed on 1,000 stars, that I should set my dreams on airplanes because that means that they're somewhere in the world waiting to be found. That life would take me there. In 2003, my grandma fell down as I was a senior. In 5 months, I was going to graduate from Carleton College, but she fell down. And I told her to get up. And she said, I can't get up, and I said, but you promised me. And she said, you have to understand that before you, there were people who loved me. I had a mom and a dad and brothers and sisters. And there is no Hmong land in the map of the world. But I'm going to climb the Hmong mountain in my heart, go back to the house of my youth, and dinner is going to be ready. My mom and my dad are going to be there, my brothers and sisters and your grandpa too. And they're going to say, where have you been? We've waited so long. My grandma's biggest fear was that she would be forgotten. She never learned how to read or write, and so when she signed her name, it was always with a shaky X. That's not how I write. I press into the fabric of pages. So I started writing the story because I wanted to tell my grandma that I would never forget her. But my father tells me that if we dream in the right direction, the dream never dies, that it always only grows bigger. And so the dream grew. I wanted the world to remember her along with me. And so I became a writer in the process. That's how it happened. Does that answer your question? Okay. Another question there? Yeah. Did my older sister know how to swim? No. My older sister crossed the Mekong River when she was only 1 month old. She almost died. On the banks of the river, my mom and dad thought she was dead. My mom started crying, and then she saw the lids of the baby flutter, and she knew that she was alive. Doe is 1 year and 9 months older than I am, but Doe acts like she's the world older. She's very bossy. Very bossy. She's an inch shorter than I am today. But she has polio in one of her legs, so when she walks, there's a slight limp. When we came to America, she said to me, I'm going to become a lawyer so you can become a doctor. And today, she is the lawyer that she told us she would become. Doe is interested in making the world even for people, because she understands how it is to limp around. Doe is a wonderful big sister. She's my best friend. When she graduated from college, she said, I'm going to go to Hamlin so you can go somewhere better. And I said, why? She goes, because life is like a ladder. If I'm going to be the first step, you're going to be the second. And she had read somewhere that Carleton was the Harvard of the Midwest. And so she said, she said to me, you have to go. And that's how I ended up there. And then after that, when I said I wanted to become a writer, she goes, you have to go into the best nonfiction program in the nation. And that's how I got to Columbia, because of Dove. She's always stayed home so I could go further away. And no, she doesn't know how to swim. At Carleton, part of the requirement of graduation was that you had to be able to swim. And I don't know how to swim either, but what I did was I floated from one end of the pool to the other. Carleton doesn't have many Hmong students. And so it's funny, I go into the swimming class, and there's 5, and oh my God, we're all Hmong. And so we floated back and forth and past each other. So I still don't know how to swim. And it's something that I would love to do. Because I love showers. I've always loved showers. When we came to America, one of the greatest moments was when I turned hot water and cold water and I make perfect water. Like, I never thought that was possible. And that blew my mind. And it continues its journey in amazing me. So one day I would love to learn how to swim. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, right there.
How long did it take you to write your book?
So on average, it takes 5 years to write a book in this country. It took me 4 years to write my book, and then a year to go through publishing. The book came out when I was 27, so I'm 30 years old now. But yeah, 4 years for me to write the book. And I can tell you there were many, many moments when I felt Shakespeare has said everything that needed to be said. There was no point in me trying to write the story. But I would go on these long walks around Columbia's campus, and I'd see the lights in the law school still on and the lights in the physics department. And I would tell my mind, I would tell my head, I would tell my heart. I'd say, somebody in the law school is going to open up a human rights case and we're never going to see it the same way again. I'd say, somebody in the physics department is looking for the cure to cancer. But they are working by electricity light. If I sit by the light of the moon, if the moon can pull the ocean tides, why can't it pull the words out of me? And then I began writing again. I've always used my imagination to do the work that I couldn't trust my body to do, my ability to do. And so it took me 4 years of pushing on. But I never thought about quitting, because everybody wanted to know what I was doing in New York. Nobody in my family had been to New York before. We'd only seen it on Law and Order. And so everybody wanted to know what I was doing there. And I said, it's because I'm telling our story. And they said, when do I get to read it? I couldn't let them down. So 4 years. But I'm writing a new book. And I'm hoping that it's going to take me 3 years. So we will see. We will see. Anything else you all want to know? Right here, sir? How hard was the transition into the United States? I'll tell you one of my earliest memories of it being really challenging. I was at North End Elementary School, and I was still very new to the country. So I told you, I come from a place where Hmong people got food 3 days out of the week, right? And we were eating French toast sticks and dipping them into syrup, and I thought it was so good. I was really, really enjoying myself. And I noticed when other kids stopped eating and started pointing at me, and I didn't know what was wrong, so I continued to eat. And then I noticed that these kids were copying me, and I was eating with my mouth open. And the whole table stopped eating, and they were laughing at me. And I started, somewhere along the way, I'm stubborn. I didn't want to say one more time that my mom and dad hadn't taught me for the rules of this world. Because if you come from a place where there's never enough to eat, you don't think about eating with your mouth closed or your mouth open. But all these kids were laughing at me, not because they thought they were being cruel, but because they thought they were teaching me something I needed to know for America. But it was in America that pulled me away from the way my mother and my father, my grandmas, the way they've always eaten, the way they taught me how to eat. So I started crying, crying, but I continued to eat, and I choked. And there was this Hmong interpreter, and so they came to take me to the principal's office, and they say, why are you crying? And I said, because they're laughing at the only way I know how to eat. And he said to me, in this country, you have to do things the way people do them. Gave me more reason to be silent. But that was hard. And things like that were hard all along the way. But when I became, and they continue to be hard, right? I'm at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I was really excited because it's not often that really young writers with no literary history, but a book published, they get opportunities like this one because I'm on faculty at the university, which means I teach, which means I'm a professor of writing, right? When I went, I was really, really excited, and I went to HR to do my paperwork. One of the pieces said that I needed to bring in a passport or either a social security card and an ID. And so I brought in my passport because I wanted to get the deal done in one. And then she said, oh, I need your social security card too for payroll purposes. And I didn't think anything of it, so I said, okay. But on the day that I'm bringing in my social security card, I get an email and she goes, can you also bring in further proof of citizenship? I don't know what it is about me that says I'm not an American. And I have to write back and CC the chair of the English department and tell them, you have in your hand a valid U.S. passport. I don't have other proof of citizenship. Is this something you ask of all incoming faculty, or is it special because of me? It's very hard to do. Things like this continue to be hard. I spoke at Appleton North, and one of the kids in the back of the class, a new refugee, so there was like 850 in the audience, and we're at the end of a wonderful session. And one of the girls raised her hand. I said, you? And she asked me in Hmong because she couldn't speak English. She says, why didn't you write the book in Hmong so I could read it too? And I answered her in Hmong. And a boy says, go home if you're going to use that language. And I had to stand on a stage with lights glaring at me and say, I'm already home. I fight so hard to belong. So many organizations, they invite me to speak, and they say, they say, how much do you want? And I quote the figure, right? Which is what people pay me to speak. And they say, you're no Garrison Keillor. And I know I'm not Garrison Keillor. He's tall. He has a deep, beautiful voice. He's an old man who's written for many years. But the work I do is no less important. And to fight for that takes a lot of heart. There are three kinds of exhaustion. There's the exhaustion of the body. You eat good food, you get lots of sleep, and you're good to go. There is the exhaustion of the mind. You read a good book, you talk to an intelligent person, and you're good to go. It is the exhaustion of the human heart that I fight continuously, to be an American. But you know what I understand? I am the Hmong from America. There's Hmong from Thailand, Hmong from Germany, Hmong from China, Hmong from French Guiana, Hmong from all over the world. The stuff that I do is the next chapter in the American story. It is an American contribution to world literature. And that is a title that I take on and I fight to own. And that is who I am. I think this fighting heart of me is very American. Because not in many places around the world do they teach a young kid like me that you can go into the world and that you can change it, influence it, make it better than it was. But in America, we study about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and all of those figures in our history books. And we learn that those figures are in there because they tried and they failed and they got up and they tried again. That is the essence of the human story, the American contribution. And that is the work I do. And so it's incredibly hard. Each and every single day. Because I don't know what I'm going to get. I go into all kinds of places, all kinds of spaces. And sometimes it's really hard to be challenged. Challenged for the life that you don't know how to live otherwise. What is home to a country what is home to a girl who comes to a country at the age of 6? What is belong if it is not that look in your eyes when you're looking at me and I'm looking at you and we know that we belong because we're Americans together. Because we're the world's greatest experiment. Because in a place like America, you can just take a kid from a refugee camp, raise her in the projects, give her one of the greatest education that money can buy, give her mics like this one to amplify the strength of a weak voice. That is hard to do. Does that answer your question? One final question. How are we on time?
About 7 minutes.
7 minutes. So I'll take 2 more questions. Right there, the gentleman in red, and then the young lady in front.
I actually have 2 questions. One is for the student next to me who's observing the National Day of Silence.
Yeah.
And her question is, if someone wanted to write, what advice would you give them? And my question is, you shared a memory from when you stopped speaking. You have a memory from when you began to speak again.
Those are wonderful questions. I remember writing in my journal. I was maybe 7, and I kept these journals because because I felt like my words had to go somewhere if they were going to go into the world as voice. And so I got these journals, and I remember writing on the bottom of one, I said, how does a writer become? And I pressed so hard that I ruined the page on the other side. And so I remember writing on the bottom of the page, she keeps on writing, period. And that is the advice I give. A writer doesn't write because great ideas come to us all the time. We write 100 pages, and maybe 10 pages are great. The more you write, the more you have to choose from. I think that the easier you make it to go to the page, the better of a time you have right there. A writer doesn't write what she knows. She writes to explore the things that she wants to know. It is a journey that we go on, a journey of discovery. I know that I've written something good when I read on the page the things that I didn't know about the world I belong to, about the heart of me. You know, my students come to me and they say, will you read this? This is so boring. And I say, if it's boring for you, it's going to be boring to me. Because that is the truth. We are our first audiences, right? If we don't teach ourselves something new, how are we going to teach somebody else? That is the standard of good writing. And so that's what you do. You continue writing and you write until you can move yourself. That's when you have power to move the world. And then the second one, do I remember the moment I began speaking? I do. I walked into a room with as much people as all of you. And it was the book launch of my book, and I thought that nobody was really going to come. It was a really stormy April. This is the anniversary of the book. At Concordia St. Paul's, so a university setting. And I walked into a room thinking that maybe my mom and dad, of course, and the publisher and a few people. But I walked into a room that was as diverse as all of you. And the men and women who taught me looked like the men and women who are in this room. And they said, they were sitting there and they're just crying, you know? And then there were a lot of Somalis, refugees, because they said that that's also our story. And then there were all these young Hmong people looking to see who this Hmong writer was. And I got up and I tried to speak, and my face grew really, really red, and my voice squeaked. And I came back and I sat down again, and I got up again to try. And my father, when we first came to America, 3 years after we came, my older sister, Dao, won the North End Elementary School Spelling Bee. And so she got a $50 gift certificate, and the teacher said, what do you want to do with it? And she says, I want to buy our father a pair of shoes, because he got his from a church basement, so it was too big, and when my father walked, it squeaked. And so Dao used her $50 to buy my father a pair of shoes, and I promised myself that one day I was going to buy him something too. When I was at Columbia, I was on a full ride. And one semester, I had $300 left. And so I went to Brooks Brothers, and I bought him a jacket, the most expensive jacket that my father has. And he had on this jacket, because he's a machinist. He has no opportunities to wear this jacket, but he had on this jacket. And he got up to me, and my father held my hand, and he said, from hardness you can give birth to gentleness. He says, you have to speak, Minai. And my father said the words. He said, if Hmong tears can reincarnate, it would rain the world in our sorrow. But because they cannot, they can only green the mountains of Pumbia. But if you speak, our lives are not lost. He said the winds of humanity will blow, and I didn't know what they looked like. So I asked my father if they looked like that scene in Pocahontas when she's singing Colors of the Wind. And he says, oh, you have so much to learn. And in the 3 years since that moment, I've been speaking. And I know what the winds of humanity look like. They are in this room right here, right now. This is it, flowing strong and fierce. We can only inspire if we're open to inspiration. We hear all the time, the single biggest influence on one human life is another. That is what I do when I speak. I look to influence, I look to inspire. And my standard is high for myself. If I bored you, you tell me, and I would change the course of the conversation. So many times young people go to speeches, lectures, and they walk out feeling like they got nothing. And the truth is because nobody can be the engine of the learning that we must do. At some point in time, we must take responsibility. We must ask what we want to know. And so that's why I spend so much of my time answering questions, not because I have answers, but because I want to think about the things that matter. And that is the reason why I speak, to give you all something to think about, so that we can create a memory, so that many years from now we can look back and know that we saw what it was like for one human being to open her heart, waiting for hands to hold it up. I want to thank all of you for being here with me. I I hope that you got something from this conversation. Like I say, I don't write speeches, so I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying because I believe in the act itself. I want to thank you sincerely.
Again, I sincerely want to give another sincere appreciation for Ms. Kao Kalia Yang for her time, and also again to St. Norbert College for generously letting us also have Ms. Yang's time this morning, and also to the One Book, One Community. Thank you so very much. If the members from St. Norbert can stand up just to be recognized, because we're indebted to you for helping to financially contribute Ms. Yang's visit to our school. Please give them a round of applause. What about the members from the One Book, One Community? Today, this morning has truly, indeed, signify the importance of a community coming together. And this has been history in making, and as Ms. Yang has mentioned, she has experienced it firsthand where college level organization, the community organization, and the Green Bay Public School has came together. Thank you very much. We're going to have a few moments here where Ms. Yang will be also signing books if you have your book with you. Thank you.